The Maryland secondary could be better than what we thought.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. Hope you guys are having a good Tuesday and getting through your week just okay. It feels a little bit like a Friday to me, but I know it's only a Tuesday, but just happy to have another day. But let's talk some Maryland football. Maryland secondary could be a lot better than what I thought personally, and maybe what a lot of you guys thought going into next year. It's honestly way too early to tell it, and until the games start, these are all just takes that I think could possibly be true. But this secondary thing has kind of picked up some momentum for me, and the more and more I think about it, the more and more confident I am with the Maryland secondary and with the pieces that Maryland has. So these are practice notes from when Maryland practiced at Morgan State. If you guys remember, last week they practiced at Morgan State. It was like a community thing where Maryland went up to Morgan State in Baltimore, to school in Baltimore, and they the programs had a joint practice. I talked a lot about it yesterday in the quarterback battle and what's kind of going on there, and some surprise that it looks like MJ Morris right now is not getting any first-team snaps, and looks like it's Billy Edwards and Cam Edge getting all the first-team reps. If you guys want to hear more about kind of the quarterback battle, make sure you go check out yesterday's episode. But today, there was a lot of notes that came out about the secondary being pretty good from the joint practice with Morgan State. And I think the secondary might be better than what we actually thought going into next year's. There's guys that could definitely surprise us, and guys that we might not be expecting a lot from, or we might not think, oh, they're a great player because they're not a returning starter or they're not a super highly ranked recruit or whatever, but they might be really good players in that, specifically talking about that cornerback room that maybe you guys don't know about, or you don't realize that they've been developing under the Maryland coaching staff. They've gotten a lot better right now. But one takeaway that I read from practice was that the secondary definitely was standing out, and they were definitely having their way against the offense. It sounded like they were forcing the quarterbacks to have a bunch of throws that were definitely inaccurate. It sounded like there's a lot of tight coverage going on out there. The wide receivers may have not been separating as well, or the quarterbacks weren't putting in the spot, but the secondary definitely made it tough on that inexperienced quarterback room. Everyone sounded like they were inconsistent. Billy Edwards and Cameron Edge, that was one of the things that they said. They said they were splitting first-team reps. Both guys were inconsistent. And then MJ Morris as well wasn't putting the ball in spots. And a big part of that sounded like it was because of the secondary. So the secondary was a huge standout part of this practice on the brief 11-on-11 that they did. And one thing I do want to say is that early on, and usually most sports, football definitely, the defense wins early on in the year. That's just how it goes. Defense is a lot simpler to play on the football field. It's a lot easier. It's not easy, but it's easier than playing the offensive side of the ball. And usually early on, the defense wins. It's just how it goes in a lot of sports. It's easier to pick up day one install defense type of stuff and be able to do that effectively than run an offense and make sure everyone's where they need to be, and this route's right, and this guy blocks this guy right, and this guy picks up this guy in this situation, or whatever it is. Defense typically wins early on in seasons. As the season goes on, that can change. But early on in the season, defense can win. And I'm just pointing that out to say, giving you some type of perspective to go with, that the cornerbacks in the secondary looked pretty good, it sounded like, in practice. I just want to let you know that their defense does usually dominate early on, but I'm sure a lot of you guys already kind of understand that and kind of understand that concept of the defense just being better than the offense early on the season, especially when the offense hasn't done a ton of stuff, especially in spring football type of settings. But The reason that the quarterback room that I'm surprised about just hearing how well they're playing is because of all the guys we lost. And the reason I say better than what we expected at the beginning is because of the guys that we lost this year, the guys that we've lost over the last couple of years. We have lost a lot of guys that are trying to go to the NFL, guys that are in the NFL as well in that secondary. And it's like, has Maryland recruited well enough to continue to turn out these type of players, these type of NFL type of players? Or is it like we're going to have a drop-off? And there's not a lot of names that I kind of knew going into this year, or I mean in terms of like big names, I mean names that I knew just because I know everyone that we recruit and everything, but there wasn't a lot of big names that you think, oh, like he's next up. He was a 4-star recruit. It wasn't a lot of that. Like last year, of course, it was Tarheeb Still. We knew he was going to be a really good player. And then we got Jaquan Shepard. He was one of the best corners in the transfer portal from Cincinnati. The year before that, we had 2 NFL guys that are on NFL rosters. Deontay Banks was the first-round pick, and Jacorian Bennett also went in the draft and was a 4th-round pick. But now I'm looking at it, and I'm like, there's not a whole lot of guys that I would say in that room that have played at all at the Big Ten level, that have played at all at Maryland even. And we even had a couple of backup guys like Corey Coley and a couple other guys that were like kind of guys that were kind of next in line, you would think, that maybe they weren't like, I never thought I was blown away with how they played, but they always seemed to be the next guys. If someone was out, if someone was hurt, or if we were up a lot in the game, they'd be the next guys that would come in. A couple of those guys transferred to NC State. And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, dang, like we kind of have to get down the roster for the quarterback position. So that's why, for me, it's a surprise with Tarheeb Still being second team all Big Ten, one of our best, most versatile players gone from last year. Jaquan Shepard gave us some really big plays down the stretch, was really good down the stretch of the year, gave up a couple of big plays early on the season. And then Glendon Miller sounds like he moved from slot back up to safety. So you have to replace everyone in the quarterback room. But the reports are that Perry Fisher might be just what I'm kind of gathering, he might be up next for Maryland football. And he looks like could surprise a lot of people. He had an interception during the practice, and he's only a redshirt freshman, so he'll be technically a redshirt sophomore next year when we're in season. And so he's the type of guy that I'm looking at. He has the athleticism and the kind of attributes to be a top-end player. And he looks like he had a really good practice. So I'm looking at him as a player that could potentially be a guy that's better than what we expected. Before the Music City Bowl game, where I do want to point out, he played really well in that Music City Bowl game. Maybe like the best standout player in terms of a guy that there's a ton of guys that didn't play a ton that got to play in that game, but he was one of the best ones in terms of he was all over the field, making plays in coverage, pass deflections. He looked really good. And the thing about him coming out of high school, it was always like he's a really good athlete, but he's a little bit new to the quarterback position. We're going to have to develop him a little bit. It might take some time, and he might be there now. He might be ready to take over and be a next really good cornerback at Maryland. It sounded like he had a really good practice, so the more I hear about him playing well, the more confidence I'm going to have in him, and that's what leads me to say I think that the cornerback room might be better than what we expected. And then on the other side, it sounds like Jalen Husky, who we kind of expected to come in and play. I think I would expect him to come in and play like pretty well. Maybe I don't expect him to be amazing right away, but he's also looked really good. He's been good in coverage, it sounded like, in practice, had tight coverage. Remember, Jalen Husky transfer from Bowling Green, a really good player for Bowling Green last year, and it sounds like he's playing really well. So if those two guys are playing well in the cornerback room, I'm not saying those are our two starters. I think that Perry Fisher probably has to compete a little bit more, but Jalen Husky, I'm pretty sure he'll be one of the starters on the outside. We'll see who demands the slot type of position. But to hear that the secondary and those two guys are playing really well overall leads me to think that we're in a good spot. We're in a better spot than I may have expected. But back to my previous point, the offense usually does not look as good as the defense early on, especially in football football, but in many sports as well. So you can take it as a grain of salt. It's also like our first practice. Like, who really knows? The offense is going to have their days. The defense is going to have their days. You hope. You hope that each side of the ball has certain days and days where they look good and days where the other side of the ball looks good. Because if both sides aren't having good days, then you're probably in a bad spot. But that's one of the takeaways I took from this practice at Morgan State. Again, it was a community type of thing. There wasn't a lot of 11-on-11, but I still do think it's important to point out how well that the Maryland secondary was playing overall, and I hope that they can keep that up. I'll be interested to see who starts in that room, but definitely they could be better than what we expected. Is the defensive line unit too quiet right now? I will tell you about that after this ad from FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA, and NHL baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. I don't know about you guys, but I love the NBA playoffs, and you guys can get in FanDuel to get some great deals. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in the app, and it's safe and secure and easy to use. Make sure you guys get on FanDuel if you want to bet over on LeBron James if you're a LeBron James fan, or if you want to bet the Wizards to win if you're a DMV sports fan like me. You can do it all on FanDuel. Or maybe you're a hockey guy and want to bet on Connor McDavid to score a goal. You can do it all on FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So the defensive line unit, they cannot be quiet this year. At times last season, I honestly thought the D-line unit was kind of quiet, and other times I thought it was good. Some games I was like, it's okay. But I don't think for us to be successful this year, the defensive line unit can be quiet for Maryland football. And it sounds like at practice, it sounds like they were quiet in the last practice at Morgan State, the practice that we've been talking about, an open practice that people were able to shed notes on. It sounds like during the 11-on-11 period, they didn't get much pressure on Billy Edwards or Cameron Edge, which you could say they can't hit the quarterback, so it's like whenever there's pressure, they can't really do anything about it. And so I do want to say that, like, I'm not really worried about it. I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, like, I don't really even know exactly if the defensive line unit wasn't good or if they were quiet, or like, I don't know exactly, but it sounded like they were quiet from a lot of the reports. But I do want to make the point that this year, I need that unit to be good. I need that unit to be elite. And I think they have the tools to do it, and I think they have the guys to do it, but they cannot be quiet if we want to be successful this year. I'm thinking about the secondary, and I know this kind of contradicts a little bit of what I said in the first segment about how the secondary might be better than what we thought. And sure, it might be, but to hold up against some of the corner or some of the receivers that we play, and to stop some of these offenses and to stop some of the running game that you have to deal with in the Big Ten, you get a combination of really good passing games nowadays and also really good run games in the Big Ten. This is no longer quite the Big Ten where it's like, let's just pound it, run it, Michigan football kind of last year type of thing, where J.J. McCarthy might throw the ball 10 times a game and they still win the game by 28 points. Sure, you got some of that in the Big Ten, and some teams have elite running games, and you need a good defensive line unit for that as well. But some schools have elite receivers. Ohio State, Oregon does. Other schools as well. I mean, I like to put Maryland up there. But schools have balance in the Big Ten, a lot of them. And your defensive line unit is really the key to a lot of like just defensive, being good on defense. The defensive line is going to be a key to a lot of that. And I think about the Maryland group, like I said, it was a little bit quiet at times last year. There were times they were definitely on. But I see no reason why this unit can't be a strength of our team And I don't know if everyone would agree with this. Let me know what you guys think, but I see no reason why it can't be a strength. We bring nearly everyone back from that unit on the edge. Kevin Wyatt is a junior now, and he's been playing since freshman year. 4.5 sacks last year. Quayshawn Fuller has 3 sacks this year and is a top-end athlete as well. Donnell Brown was really good out of the portal last year, our highest-graded PFF player. Jordan Phillips and Tommy King-Basote complement each other really well and plug up the inside. I'm not seeing why that room can't be a really good unit up there for the defensive line unit at Maryland. We might need a guy to step up in that room and to really take on elite status. I've been thinking about that, but they can't be quiet. They can't have quiet practices. They can't have quiet games. We can't have games that they completely run the ball on us. When I think about Jordan Phillips and when I think about also Tommy King-Basote, I think there's no reason that teams should be able to just run down our throat. Like at times Michigan did last year, like at times Penn State did last year, like at times other teams did this last year. I mean, our run defense was pretty good. It was in the middle to upper pack of the Big Ten, so it wasn't like it was bad at all. But I think that team should have trouble running against us with that defensive line and that interior defensive line unit. And I also think the pass rush should somewhat be there with these guys, Quayshawn, Donnell, Kellen Wyatt, guys that have really been there a while. And you got some other younger players that potentially could be really good players up there. And so I see no reason why that group to be quiet. I see no reason why that can't be one of the better groups in the Big Ten even. I mean, we bring everyone back. Whenever you bring everyone back on a defensive line unit that was not bad last year, they were definitely not amazing, but they weren't bad. You would think that they could have good games. You think they would have good moments. You would think they would be pretty consistent. And this is my thing. I go back and forth. I read somewhere it's like they need one guy to kind of stand out and be the guy, and everyone else is like pretty solid in there. And some of that I kind of agree to is you kind of want someone that can just be a complete disruptor, like an elite pass rusher that is just like teams can't block and they have to game plan around it and you have to double team them, like an Aaron Donald on the inside for the Rams, how teams have to double him. And guess what that does for everyone else? It opens up the edge for everyone. It opens up one-on-one blocks for everyone else. Edge rushers can get in there easier. Or if you have a guy like Myles Garrett, and of course we don't have those type of guys, but it just makes it easier for everyone else when there's an elite player on the defensive line, a guy that's playing at an elite level. So I love to have a guy that can get 6-7 sacks even, maybe not even like super elite, but just a good player up there. But I also don't know if we have that type of guy, but I think we have a really good committee of players that there's no reason that they should be too quiet. And if they are too quiet, then it's going to be really hard this season because we don't have Tarheeb still back there. We don't have Bo Braid back there this year. We don't have Daquan Shepard back there this year. And even if our secondary is good, you want good defensive line unit. And if we want to be successful this year, our defense might have to take another step up without having Talia, without having some of those, without having a quarterback that's played elite and been one of the best in the Big Ten for a while now. You just might need more defensive production from guys up front. You might need a couple more turnovers on those guys. You might need another more sacks on third down, or you might need some more of that type of stuff for a lower running average allowed to be able to win some of these games that you normally wouldn't be able to win or the games that maybe you would normally be able to win with a Talia. But now that you don't have him, maybe the quarterback's not going to be quite as good. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I think that the quarterback play is going to drop off some. And so now you got to look at it and you got to be like, okay, like we got to make up for it somehow if we want to still get better. And so the defensive line unit has to play a lot better. I think they have to be a little bit more consistent. Not saying they were bad, but I'm just saying that this practice, apparently they were quiet. But even if they weren't quiet, I want to still make this point that this D-line unit, everyone is back on the edge and on the interior, basically. Basically, everyone's back. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, there's no excuse, there's no reason for that group not to be somewhat consistent, not to have guys that have big plays. I think there's no reason to think that they cannot do that. Dylan Wade, Maryland tight end, could be special. I'll tell you about that right now. So Maryland freshman tight end Dylan Wade has a chance to be really special and a good player for the Terps. So Dylan Wade currently is a freshman, but next year he'll be a sophomore. It's weird talking about football in the spring because it's like you think of these guys as class and you're like kind of already thinking about it for next year, but technically we're still in this school year. So it's like, what do you call them? But he's a freshman right now, but he'll be a sophomore the next time we see him play. And it sounds like Dylan Wade is really impressing different people on the Maryland staff, and he stood out at the practice at Morgan State. I love when we have these type of practices, 11 on 11, you can see it, and it's open up to fans because you get so many different reports and so many different cool nuggets that you can talk about. Like, this isn't something I probably would have been able to talk about without Maryland having this practice. So it really made their job easier for me as well. But I'm excited for Dylan Wade. It sounds like he has a chance to be a really good player, and he stood out at the practice and played well. Apparently he caught a really nice ball from Billy Edwards in the 11 on 11 session. I don't have any film of it or anything, but it would be kind of cool to see that. I saw Caden Prather, I think, make a really good play at the practice at Morgan State. But back to the point, Dylan Wade caught a really nice pass from Billy Edwards in the 11 on 11 practice, and he definitely looked like a dude for Maryland football. I like saying a dude. It basically just means like he's a guy. Like he's going to be a really good player for whatever team it is. But he's a dude for sure for Maryland football. And Coach Loxley thinks so too. He said Wade could be special after the practice. And one of his interviews, he said Wade has the potential to be special, which I couldn't agree more. I think he's got the attributes to be really good. And we saw it a little bit in the Music City Bowl game where he had those 2 catches, one for a tight end. I think here's the thing. I think he's a really good receiving threat. I do. I think he's going to be able to separate. I think he's is a good athlete. I think he's got some speed. I think he's similar to Corey Dyches in some ways. I think he's not quite as fast, but might be a little bit more like fluid overall than Corey Dyches, but I like him as a player definitely, and I think he has a chance to be an X factor this year. I think he's a guy that like not a lot of people know a lot about coming into the season, but it's like after it's like that's a guy that is going to be a really good player for us for the next couple of years, for the next 2 years after this year, after next year, we could be looking at him like that, and he can also be an X factor. And what I mean by that is like he's a guy that's like, okay, he's not on very many people's radar, but he also makes a couple of plays, and maybe it's not 7 catches for 100 yards. Maybe it's 2 catches for 15, 16, 17 yards that really make the difference in the game. I think Dylan Wade has a chance to do that. But like I said, played really well in practice, had a really good catch in 11 on 11 period. And so looking at next season in terms of where does he place on the depth chart, I think Preston Howard is definitely tight end 1 right now. But the interesting thing about it is that the tight end room has definitely been like a question mark going into next year. And similar to the quarterback room, actually, I could say that I feel a lot better about the tight end room now. Just like I said, I felt better about the cornerback room with the things that I've been hearing about Dylan Wade. Coach Loxley isn't just going to say this guy has a chance to be special just because. Usually coaches save that for guys that have a chance to be really good, guys that can kind of deal with that little bit of pressure of the coach having an expectation. But I totally expect him to be tight end 2. Maryland likes running a lot of 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. And so if he's playing well, that opens up that package for Maryland football to be able to run sets with 2 tight ends on the field. He's a bit small right now, probably needs to get a little bit stronger, but I still think he's in a really good spot to play for Maryland football. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.